It's an important issue, obviously, and getting to be involved in hockey and to be a coach. And you just try to make a little bit of difference too, and wherever you can, and trying to make it a better locker room and kids be more aware of each other and what's appropriate, what's not appropriate, and trying to treat people the way we want to be treated and respecting each other. Having everybody stand up and talk about it is a good start. It's going to help. And when people hear something now, they're intended, they'll be like, that's not okay.
Just watch me now.
Welcome to Up My Hockey with Jason Podolin, where we deconstruct the NHL journey, discuss what it takes to make it, and have a few laughs along the way. I'm your host, Jason Podolin, a 31st overall draft pick who played 41 NHL games, but thought he was destined for 1,000. Learn from my story and those of my guests. This is a hockey podcast about reaching your potential. Today we have a first ballot Hall of Famer on the show. Not often you get to say that, and I am really happy to be able to introduce Jarome Iginla to the listeners of Up My Hockey. Jarome is a peer of mine, meaning that we played against each other in the Western Hockey League for 3 seasons. We also played together as part of the World Junior Championship team for Canada that won gold in 1996. So Jarome and I have a bit of history. Obviously, our careers took different directions come pro. So I never played against him as a pro, but did run into him as teenagers. And Jarome now, it's interesting to me because having somebody who is your own age, actually Jerome's a year younger than me, kind of embody this role model example type persona is quite interesting for me. But that is what Jarome Iginla is to me. I think he represents everything that is right about Canadian hockey. And why I say Canadian is because he's a Canadian player. And the way he played the game, the way he represented the game, the way he carried himself through the game as an ambassador and as a leader and as a role model, everything about Iggy is just right, I think. And when I think of Canadian hockey player, like I honestly, Mario Lemieux was my guy growing up, but Mario Lemieux was ultra talented. He worked hard, but he was ultra talented. He wasn't that physical. Gretzky was Gretzky, the great one, the greatest ever. But when I think of like Canadian hockey players, when I think of Canadian players with the DNA of a Canadian hockey player, I think of guys like Chris Pronger, Scott Stevens, Brendan Shanahan, Eric Lindros, and Jarome Iginla. Like, I think that he played the game hard with a level of intensity that was intimidating. He knew when to fight. He could fight. He could score goals. He was a great teammate. He just played the game the right way. And I just think everything about that is like, you know what? If you could put a poster up of what I think a Canadian hockey player should be like, it's Jarome Iginla. He represents that line that I've talked about on my Up My Hockey platform of like being, when people say I am a hockey player, I want that to mean what Jarome Iginla represented, right? There should be a level of pride when you say I am a hockey player. On and off the ice, there's a level of respect that comes with saying that. There should be a level of pride, and there's a level of just reverence, right, for the game that you get to play this game, this special game with this great history, and we need to represent it well. And for Jarome, he checks all the boxes, and for him to spend 2 hours with us tells you what an amazing type of player he is, what an amazing type of person he is. He's so grateful. He's so thankful. He's so easy to talk to. And, I won't even get into the hockey card stuff. Like, look at the back of his hockey card, 1,500 NHL games, 600 goals in the best league in the world. Only, I think, 20 players have done that. He's one of only 7 players to have scored 30 goals in 11 consecutive seasons. Like, he won 2 Memorial Cups. He won 2 gold medals. He won a World Cup of Hockey. The only thing he didn't win was the Stanley Cup, and he got to Game 7 of the finals and came 1 goal away from doing that. So the accolades are endless with this guy, but I really do feel he's a gentleman and a great person first and foremost, and that's what we try to get in here today in this interview. I hope you love it as much as I did. He's a hard guy not to like. So without further ado, I bring you first ballot Hall of Famer and all-around all-star gentleman, Mr. Jarome Iginla. An old nemesis of mine from back in the junior days, Mr. Jarome Iginla. Iggy, thanks so much for taking the time to be in here today.
Hey, Pods, thanks for having me.
No problem, man. This is a real honor. I know you're a busy guy. Man, it's been so long, which is so crazy too, right? Like from going back to battling for 3 years against each other in Kamloops to, winning a gold medal World Junior. And then kind of our careers, definitely took a different course. And then, we kind of pass each other a little bit in the summers sometimes, but it's going to be awesome to go over, the Hall of Fame career, the 20 seasons, all the amazing things that you covered. But I do want to get into kind of where it all began and back in St. Albert, which is really what I don't know much about. I think the genesis of each of us is an interesting thing to cover. So can you tell us, Iggy, just a little bit about, growing up in St. Albert, a hockey hotbed in and of itself? I'm sure there wasn't much else going on there in the wintertime other than hockey. How were you introduced to the sport, and what do you remember from your days there?
I will, but first of all, I want to say when you introduced me, you said our nemesis. I'm thinking, geez, we won World Juniors together, and that's what we got. But yeah, we had some good battles, the Blazers and the Chiefs. It was, man, that was a ton of fun, junior and stuff. But thanks for having me. Yeah, I grew up in a great hockey place in St. Albert, and it's a really good community to grow up. As far as you can get everywhere on your bike. You can walk everywhere. Even now, it's obviously bigger. It's probably was maybe 35,000 when I was younger, and now it's probably 60 or something. I might be a little off. But they had a school. They had, every neighborhood had kind of like a school and a rink, an outdoor rink. So a really neat place to grow up, and fields. They had baseball parks, and it was just a really good sports city. So I was very, very lucky. Very blessed to get to grow up there. My mom moved. We moved there at age 7 from Edmonton, and I got involved in sports. My grandparents lived out there, so it was more support after school. I could go and I'd go to my grandparents after school as she'd be working and stuff. So it was awesome. But and everybody in St. Albert, pretty much as most of Canada, most boys played hockey. And I started hockey age 7, but it was a little bit. I was definitely behind when I started. It was a little bit late. I played baseball and I played a ton of sports, but St. Albert was a big part of my sport career and falling in love with it, and then being able to catch up because there were outdoor rinks everywhere. There was one right down the street, a block from my grandparents' house, and then as I got older, my mom, we moved when I was 13. To a place where there was a half a block an outdoor rink. So,
right.
It was a chance, like almost your own backyard rink, and they had nice sheds for heat and warm, and you could spend a whole day there.
Was that, you mentioned, that you started late, which is, I keep thinking about Ed Jovanovski when I hear that, because I can't believe how late he started and ended up being the first overall pick, my year, which is insane. But there was that conversation in our house just with my own boys, because my middle son, who's now a goalie, started relatively late, and it was second year novice was when he started, and it was almost at that point where, if you didn't really get in, you're almost feeling like, man, like I need to get in, right? Because everyone's played now for 3-4 years, and it's like, where do you start, kind of? So were you like, how far behind the 8 ball do you remember being? Were you lagging quite a bit behind?
Yeah, I was, I remember it better than it probably was, right? But so I was into sports. My mom put me in like floor hockey at 5 years old in Edmonton, in a community floor hockey league. She took me to like roller skating, so I had a little bit of balance, and I played t-ball, baseball, but that was it. So when I went out to my first practice, my first tryout in St. Albert, I had my grandpa sign me up for hockey, and I actually went out to the outdoor rink one time the year before with my aunt, took me out, and I just tried it, and I fell around, and I said, sure, I'll play. My grandpa wanted me to play. He loved hockey. So I went to my first tryout in St. Albert, and I had I showed up. My grandpa took me, and it was at the Parent Street Arena in St. Albert. That's no longer there. It was downtown there, and he expected them to have a jersey and some socks for me. So I had never, I was excited. I had my equipment. It was time to get on. We were a little bit behind, and he said, like, you got to go on. It's tryouts. You got to go on. So I had never been in organized hockey before. I went on for my first tryout. No socks over my shin pads, no jersey, rolling around out there, barely skate. Can you imagine how I looked? It was so rough. I didn't know any better though, and I was just crashing around out there. My grandpa went and got me a jersey, and it was kind of funny. It was kind of a story. The only jersey that was available in my size is from the sports store down the street. Was a Flames jersey, and Flames weren't that popular in St. Albert, Edmonton. So he actually got me this. I wasn't that excited. It had no crest, but it was all the Flames colors, and that was my first ever jersey, and I actually still have it. My mom kept it for me, so I always thought that was cool. But if you're wondering what I made, it was you could make novice C, novice B, or novice A your first year as a 7-year-old, and I made the bottom league novice C, and I deserve to be there for sure.
Oh my God, I absolutely love that story. Like, if we could have a picture of that, I mean, how many people around that rink were thinking, oh, here's a future Hall of Famer in the NHL?
Oh my gosh, I had a big afro, my hair going everywhere. Oh, it was, it was, I can't imagine how I looked. My mom said, that first year, I felt like by the end of the year, I graduated to be able to, like, we'd made the playoffs, and you put your 5 guys on. We made the overtime, and I got to be one of the 5 guys. I was a defenseman, and I thought I was pretty good. But my mom said, no. She said they would go by you, but you're ultra competitive, and you would dive. And the refs weren't calling a lot of penalties, so I just dive at everybody. But skating was a tough go for a while there for me.
That's a hard thing to do, man. Like, really, being on ice skates is tricky. Is a tricky thing. You're obviously a good athlete. I assume to end up being such a great hockey player. Was there ever a decision at any point? Like, was another sport ever considered as being something you would do full time?
Well, I love baseball, and I always dreamed of being like Bo Jackson and playing in the NHL and being a baseball player. And as I got a little bit older, I had 2 things. I realized that the seasons didn't quite work because hockey be going on and baseball is going on, and you're not really allowed to leave one or the other in the pros. So that dream came to an end. But also, I wasn't as a good baseball player as I was a hockey player as I got older. So that the opportunities were better for me in hockey. But I played baseball all the way from 7, all the way up till I was 17. I'd been so it was a ton of fun, and it was a great release. But I did when I was about 15, I had to make a decision, I guess, whether I was going to go the WHL or how it is, the WHL, or whether you want to go a college route. So my grandpa did say that he talked to one scout for North Dakota that said, they wanted me to play hockey there, and that since I played baseball, they were kind of intrigued. My grandpa said, well, what if you could come and play both? And they said, well, maybe, they'd never even see me play baseball, but they would stick me on there. But I love baseball too, and played a ton of it. I played a lot of sports growing up, and I'm happy I didn't go to North Dakota. They used to have a baseball team there, but obviously I went to Kamloops, and it was a great decision and a great experience. But I love sports. I absolutely loved it. Had a great time growing up. Played as many sports as I could, and you name it. Literally, we should. I might have played it.
Right. Is that that's become a bit of a point of contention, especially now with how crazy it is being a hockey dad. And I know you are a hockey dad now, and when you have kids that are good and they're passionate about what they're doing, you can play hockey every month of the year if you want to. And I know that we grew up in environments that weren't necessarily like that, and some of us are a little bit old school in the fact of thinking that is the way it should still be, right? That we should still be playing as many sports as we can for kind of as long as we can. That is where I'm at personally, and not to obviously bias your opinion, but where do you think that lies? I mean, is it better to be just a better all-around athlete, or if hockey's your thing, then just dive in with both feet and do it?
Oh, that's a good question. And I ask myself, my wife and I talk about it all the time. I think that you want to be a really, really good athlete for sure. I think that being able to have coordination and being able to know your body and you pick up things quicker, but I don't think you can do hockey. So first of all, to go back, my personal thing is that you have to be, some parents will put their kids in everything and they'll take them to everything, but the kid won't really get as good as he should or get that much better. And to me, I think it's more, is that they have to be into it to get better. You know what I mean? There's lots out there. They go to practice. I've been coaching for the last, I guess this is my 4th year since being out, and I get a chance to coach the boys teams, both boys teams. And you do see it over the years. The ones that get better, they come to practice. They want to be there. They're focused. They like it, but they're working hard. As soon as I turn my head, not just when I'm looking, you know what I mean? Or when one of the other coaches, it's when I'm not looking, they're still focused. They're still working on something. They go home, they work on something. And the ones that aren't as into it, nothing wrong with that, but I don't think they get as good. But where I went with that is that I think that cross training is so important because you can't just be into hockey all the time mentally. It's a very, and I think any sport, I think you need a break. I think that doesn't mean you need 4 or 5, 6 months off, but I think the cross training helps you keep getting more athletic, helps you get faster, more power, more coordinated, and then you're fresher when you go back to your other sports. So I love, like when I was younger, if we had 2 weeks off between hockey and baseball, and the baseball season both ways, but I did play some summer hockey, but it was like that 2 weeks just made you, chomp at the bit to get going. You know what I mean? Like I wanted to be doing stuff, and I'm sure you did too. You want to play as a kid. You want to be out there. Our boys and our daughter, they don't want to be on a break and, oh, you get 2 weeks off. They'd be like, what? I don't want 2 weeks off. They want to do something. They want to do some sport, and thankfully right now, preferably hockey. But so I think the cross training is a huge thing. And I think it is because it's good to give your hips a break and your body a break and train different things. But I think your mind needs to. And while you're taking a break, you can still get better at the sport you're doing.
Yeah, no, I think that's a great point. And it is interesting because every athlete's different. I mean, I think about my oldest right now as you're talking, like he is hockey fanatic, right? Like he loves hockey, and there's not anything else that he loves. Let's go do this. And he'll maybe go do it, but it's almost like you're talking, like, I mean, he's kind of half there, he'd rather be on the ice, so it's tough to moderate that. I think as a parent, it's one of the things that we need to be good at is, what do they need? How much do they need? Because sometimes what they want, we know isn't exactly what they need. So, you have to try and balance that. But I want to get into that a little bit as a hockey parent for sure. And I want to, maybe the segue though is going to be like your parents and your growing up in the support system that you had. You already mentioned your grandparents. I know that you were in your mom's home for the most part, but dad was still a part of your life from my understanding. How did that support network and that infrastructure of, your family life create the Jarome Iginla that I'm talking to today?
I was extremely, extremely blessed. So my parents were divorced. They were, I guess, kind of hippies, and they got married and they were divorced before I was like 1, and now I look at them and are even all the way growing up. It's hard to believe, like, I can't believe they were ever together, kind of, you know what I mean? They're just two very different people, two wonderful people, and very different. And ever since I was younger, my dad, he was always remarried. So as far back as I can remember, my dad's always had my stepmom, and then I was always with my mom. But yeah, thankfully my mom, Edmonton's not that big. You can get anywhere around Edmonton in half hour, one into the other. So I grew up with my mom, and I saw my dad regularly, and really I didn't see him all the time, but whenever I wanted to see him, if I called him, I knew I always could, and I knew he'd always come. And that was really, really important to me. And I think that was something that I didn't want to go to I didn't have regular visiting hours at my dad's. It was my mom is really, whenever I wanted to go, I could go. And if I needed to go or wanted to go see my dad, he would surprise me sometimes and come out and, come play tennis, or we'd go do stuff. And I'd see him a decent amount, but I saw him as much as I wanted to. And I'm happy that I didn't have to go, and everyone has their own situation. And but for me, it worked. And what was most important is I just felt like I could rely on them, and like my dad, and call him whenever I needed them. And that was the most important. So going to St. Albert, my mom moved to St. Albert at age 7 and to be closer to my grandparents so that, after schools I could go there, as I said. And it was awesome. My grandparents, they love sports. My mom loved sports. My dad wasn't really into sports. He was going to school. He was in pre-med, and then he finished in, he's a lawyer. So he was really into school and he loved it. But he wasn't really into sports. He knows now he loves them. He loves them and, it's all that. But when I was younger, he's like, if I lived with him, I wouldn't have played sports. So, but my mom also says that she needed to put me into sports because I had so much energy, and like I had a hard time staying focused. And so literally every sport, like I was in bowling at, from 6 to 10 years old. I played, at the tennis. I played obviously hockey, baseball. In school, I played volleyball, basketball, in the junior high. And, I tried soccer. So it was like badminton. I loved them. I loved just to be, but saying that, there's only so much time in the day. So if I'm playing those things, school, I wasn't a straight A student. Unfortunately now with our kids, we chase them around. They got to find enough time to do that. So I was a solid student and graduated high school and everything, but there's only so much time in a day. So the school, no one was chasing me around all the time to do my homework after schools and stuff. So that did take a little bit of a back seat, I guess, as far as trying to get straight A's or such. So, but yeah, I'd go to my grandparents after school and got to just play and be a kid and move around and get to that outdoor rink as much as I could. He would get me into hockey schools, power skating to catch up. And it was all about just having fun. I never had a game. They literally never, ever, my mom would go, she didn't really know hockey. She'd be like, oh, great game. No matter what, just great job. My grandpa never, ever, he never ever told me bad game or anything or work harder. He just enjoyed it.
Right. Is there, you've been, I don't know what the right word is, revered, lauded, admired for your character and your leadership throughout your 20 years. And there's not a reporter, I think, that has a bad thing to say about you. Does that come from where you came from? Do you think was that a part of what was important to be Jarome Iginla and to have that name?
Oh, thanks. Well, definitely my family is a big part of it. I mean, I could, I have 2 brothers and 2 sisters, half brothers and sisters, and very close with them. They're wonderful. And they've been very supportive over my career. And, like I say, I had my dad, my mom and grandparents. And so another thing that I was always really blessed with too, is that I always felt like somebody was always happy to see me, like my mom never saw me as much as she probably wanted to because she had to work a lot. And, she'd pick me up after late in the day and maybe spend a couple hours before bedtime. And, she made, special days like every Tuesday. I was kind of, a little bit, I don't know, maybe a little bit spoiled in the sense that, every Tuesday she would, she couldn't drop me off or pick me up every day from school, but Tuesdays was her one day at lunch. She could get me like any hot lunch, so I could come up with something like McDonald's or Edo, something that she would bring to school. And it made me feel pretty special also, very enjoyable. So, but I did feel that I was extremely blessed in a very happy childhood, but because literally no one, they were always like, you didn't spend too much. They're always excited to see me. They made me feel like, and that's a pretty neat feeling as a kid. And my grandparents were happy to have me and help out. And, and maybe I didn't spend that much time always in one. So, but it was a ton of fun. And, but yeah, my dad's very, very close to him. And my grandpa, they're my parents, my mom, my grandma, they're all wonderful examples for me. And about trying to be do your best and try to treat people the way you want to be treated and to learn and grow and to try to improve and, not just about sports, but life. And also, I mean, I believe in God and in Jesus and trying to, I think the most important thing, I think my mom said, and my dad is, and it is really, I said it, but just trying to remember to treat people how you'd want to be treated, and you try to, and I think teams, being on all the different teams growing up, you learn things, and you make mistakes. Sometimes you're rude, or you'd like to do things over, but try to do your best. And they've been great examples, and I've played with amazing people and had great coaches, and from minor hockey on, and I'm still learning, and now I'm, you coach the kids, and there's some good days and you feel like, man, I got this. It was a great practice. And another day you're like, I wasn't a very good coach today. Did I get too mad? Did I get too grumpy? So it's part of life, and it's a lot of fun.
Do you think one of the words, I don't even know if you used the word, but you're definitely, leaning towards it, was being interested in things and curious, and curiosity, I find, is like such a valuable trait to have. And it's something that we can grow. But if, like, to be a high performer and to try and get better and to be humble enough to recognize that on a personal level, we need to be curious, right? We need to ask the questions, whether it's internal questions or whether it's questions externally to those who are around us in our inner circle, about, how can I get better, or what can I improve, or how can I look at this angle differently? Do you feel that has been something that served you in hockey and in parenting?
Yeah, that's a good point you make. Curiosity, and I think of it more like, I think if you can help I think as a parent, we have to try to help our kids find their passion, right? And to be something that they're curious about, and that they want to get better at, whether it's science, whether it's mechanics, whether, sports. It's I was very fortunate. My mom and grandparents got me in a ton of sports. I loved sports. They recognized that early. All I wanted to do was go to camps. I would just sit out there. My grandpa's he had a what do you call it? Not a garage, but it had a cover, so it was
like a carport, kind of.
Carport, yeah. You
Yeah.
don't see many, carports now, right? I haven't seen as many, but he had a carport. I could shoot the ball against it, and I would shoot out there all day, and tennis ball, and it would come back, and and that, but it just gave me an outlet there, and so I was always trying to play some, and I was curious, if I'd order those videos about, Brett Hall or Ray Bork and how to improve the shot, but it was something that I was into. You know what I mean? If I don't know, like, I think the most important thing I like is to try to find what your kids really like, because I think we all have something that we're into, and it's different, and whether it's music, whether it's I think that's great when parents help if they have the opportunity and they can put their kids in stuff and try to notice what it is, because sometimes you see is, if a parent loves hockey more than their kid does, that's great. If the kid is there for the right if you want him to be there for the interactions in the locker room, for the exercise, for trying something different, that's great. And that's a great sport. It's an unbelievable fun sport to be a part of. But if you're trying to help him excel and think how he can get to be a pro or a really, really high level, if they don't love it, they'll never do enough. And this is just hockey's example. It could be baseball, it could be the violin, you name it, in my opinion. Is the passion has to be there. Otherwise, you just won't put enough time in compared to the next guy who doesn't even feel like they're really working. They're just having fun as they're working.
Right. Yeah. Find enjoying the process, right, of getting better. And I think that is one of the coolest things that I like about being involved in kids that are passionate. You've already mentioned it in who you've seen on your teams, right? The ones that are keeners, the ones that are, showing up every day and are enjoying being on the ice. I can definitely relate to that too. And then we're allowed to use hockey as that platform to teach some of these great things, like perseverance or resilience or teamwork, or all these great person traits, right? Because they have this thing that they love and they light up when they're going to, and they're playing. And now you can use that as a tool. I heard one thing that was interesting. It said, hockey or team sports teaches character. And then there was like the counter argument that, well, no, I don't really think it does, because it only teaches character if the coach makes it about character. If the coach makes that be kind of one of the first or second things that you're talking about. And I think that's where you're going. That's where I think the connection is there too, because when you have that kid that wants to do well, wants to be a high performer, is passionate about the thing, now we can use it, right, to teach those character traits that, again, I'm going back to you because you wore that C so well. You represented Canada so well, represented your family so well that I assume that character must be a big thing on your hockey teams and within the four walls of your own home.
Thanks. No, I mean, I'm trying. Yeah, we're trying. And as a coach, it's definitely a big responsibility. And I do, it also makes me appreciate growing up and how many good minor hockey league coaches I had, minor baseball, all the different sports I mentioned. And yeah, it's a responsibility, and you want them to improve, in their skills and everything. But yes, you also want them to become better teammates, to become better kids and learn things that, will help them become better people as they grow up. And I think the game teaches a lot about just being a part of it. So when I went back, just to go back a little bit, is like I love the elite side of hockey and trying to get better and do that. But it's still an amazing, wonderful sport, even if it's not just about trying to excel. It's just trying. My point was more, as parents, let's enjoy that part of it. And if they love it and you can kind of nurture it, and that might come at different times. Like our one son loved it right away, like yours, he said, and just wants to do it all the time. And our other was kind of lukewarm, but about 10 years old, he loves it too now, and so we're lucky we stuck with it, and they both love it. But it, instead of just moving him out of it and finding something else, he was, like I say, he could probably take it or leave it a little bit, and now he loves it. So we're happy we stuck with it. He's loving the sport. But that's why I love sports in general, and I love team sports. And I think even without a coach there, you can learn so many things from your teammates, being around them, the interactions, being uncomfortable, as what I talk with our guys about. I coach a 14-year-old team and a 12-year-old team. And it's really the same thing, is like, be a good teammate. It goes back to what I just said earlier, is how would you want to be treated as a teammate? If your teammate makes a mistake, and he doesn't see you on a pass, do you want to come back and do you want yelling like, oh, is that going to help him? Is that going to make him feel good? Or how do you say it? How do you phrase it? You know what I mean? And how can you encourage him and pick a guy up? If you're, 5 guys and there's another guy that maybe you're not as comfortable with and he's just sitting by himself, if you're going to do something, invite him. Wouldn't you want to be invited, or do you want to have them just sit there? So I think there's so many lessons. It would go on, and I'm sure you've already done so many of them, but I love it. And I think it's a big part of life, and whatever they go on to do later, I think they can take that with them, and interactions and learning and growing. And sometimes, as I'm sure you've seen, teammates can start, kids can start out as a tougher teammate and become a lot better one, and then it helps them on the ice, and kids grow, we all grow.
Yeah, no, I agree. And I think that's great the way you're framing that too, because you mentioned your grandparents and your mom just saying good game, like just kind of there for the love of the sport. And one thing that I recognize too is sometimes it becomes too serious too quick. And in the way that you're even talking about in the elite high performance, like my 11-year-old is so worried about getting good. Like he really wants to get good that I have to constantly remind him, man, this is like fun. Like you're 11, like you're 11, go have a good time, like enjoy it. Right. So again, like we're, to make sure that we keep that in the, not in the rearview mirror, but right in front of us, right? That this is what it's supposed to be, which is a good time, right? You're supposed to enjoy your friends and enjoy the game, and then have some fun with the skill development too. But I think parents right now maybe need to remind themselves of that as well, right? That this is supposed to be fun for these guys.
It is, and then like you say, is that there's a whole bunch of different type of situations. You know what I mean? Like for you, your one son there, it sounds like. And my middle son, I have a daughter who is just turned 16, and then the 2 boys that are 14 and 12. So Tej is our middle. He's 14. He has a similar attitude to what I think you said about your son, is like he wants to get really, really good. You know what I mean? Show me what I can do. I'll do it. Show me. Come on, show me. So, he can take a little bit more of the practice, and you can kind of give him more. And then others, they're not all the same. You know what I mean? So that's kind of the fun challenge we have as parents. That's like, one size doesn't fit all. It's some need a little more, some need a little more encouragement. It's kind of like the thing as a coach, right? You don't treat every kid exactly the same. it kind of sounds like, in the theory, oh, everybody should be treated the same on a team. Well, no, they're not all the exact same personalities. Some like a kick in the butt. Some you kick them in the butt, and then they're like, they don't want to play anymore. They've lost all their confidence, and they're like, you can't. So
Right.
I think that's kind of similar with trying to nurture our kids in their journey of what they like and their passion. And so, I think it's kind of getting to know your own kid and trying to be, kind of look for certain signals and stuff to make sure they're having fun.
You mentioned kind of the blanket coaching philosophy, and I think that in our era, or at least when we grew up, let's say like in junior and probably your first few years of pro, I would assume that you had coaches that were like that. I know that I sure did. It was like, kind of a top-down, one-size-fits-all type scenario, and the game seems to evolve a little bit that way, and I think much for the better, to try and teach what makes everyone go. I had one of your former coaches on here as a guest, Jared Bednar, with Colorado, and we talked quite at length about that. Now that you're a coach, it is seeing the game through a different lens, like for sure. Whether you're coaching 12-year-olds or 14-year-olds is different than being a player. Do you now, looking back on your career, is there anybody like do you know now what type of coach like suited you well? Like how would you get the most out of Jarome Iginla as a coach? Like how would I approach you to get you to be a beast out there?
Well, first of all, I really like Jared Bednar. I didn't have him long in Colorado 1 year, and you could tell right away he was a really, really good coach. And his communication skills, his intensity was like, he knew when to dial it up, and you could see his passion. And I really liked him, and you could see how well their team is doing, and they got a great young team, and excited that he's done so well. But he's one that really I was, I got to play 20 years in the NHL. It was a true blessing, fortunate for sure. And I had a lot of different coaches, and he was one that, he just felt like this guy is a really good coach and is going to do some really good things. Who would get, what would, I think communication for myself as a player, that was really, really important. And I think one that I felt was fair. I didn't mind getting in trouble, but I didn't like, it was kind of like the ones that, if I wasn't going well and you told me I wasn't going well, I'm fine with that. But I don't want, like, how some think like they can just kind of twist it, even if you feel like you're playing hard and it's not working, like I don't want to, you know what I mean? It's kind of like, because I really tried to push myself, and it doesn't mean I would always do it, but I put, we put pressure on ourselves as players and stuff. And, I should have been ready for that question. That was a good question. Communication. What else? I really like.
So fair, honest communication first and foremost, right? So like, tell me straight, be honest.
Yeah.
Right. Just be honest and be straight. No games. One.
Absolutely. Yeah. That's one. And I also I didn't mind if the coach was mad when we lost, but when we won, I want them to be happy. I really liked if our coaches with our team, if we won a game, the whole purpose is to win a game. You don't have to be thrilled if we didn't play great, but I don't want to be getting in trouble or, and that's what now as a coach, you kind of have to find that fine line, because the team might not have played as good as they could, but if they still win, there has to be some kind of enjoyment in that, because that's the whole purpose in the end of it, is to improve and win games, right? Especially professionally. It's really to win games. So, I didn't mind if they were upset when we lost, because we should be, but some coaches weren't that happy. It didn't seem, or it didn't come across when we won. And I really enjoyed the ones that enjoyed our wins. But it's a hard one. But I like that. And they also didn't treat everybody the same. So that's kind of a catch. You want it to be fair, so the rules apply to everybody. I think that's important. If not special rules for people, but more that the communication could differ with each guy. And they also, I would say number 3 or number 4, whatever I'm on, I would say rules. I really thought, especially in the NHL, was so important for players to know their rules and to be appreciated for their rules, whether it's PK, power play, tough guys, whatever it is, what you did for the team, what line you're on, if it's third, fourth, are you the energy guy? So that would go back to the communication. And one of the best coaches I've had, it was one of my favorite. Not always at the time, but Daryl Sutter. I really liked Daryl Sutter, and he was tough. And he would be owly. But he was owly when he came to the rink because it came for a purpose, and I see that now even more so, is that was time to turn it on, and getting ready to compete. But he knew everybody on his team, I felt like, knew their role. And, and if you were falling out of your role, he'd tell you, and then you might be moving to a new role, and somebody might move up to another one. But it wasn't just, some of the coaches just left it open, and then everyone, it almost seems like you're fighting for roles, like everybody, and no one's happy. You don't feel good if you're a fourth liner because you want to get up to the third or second, but you feel good if you're a fourth line guy that's getting a pat on his back, that's doing the role that the coach said, and having success in it. You can find some, you feel good about it. So
you're part of it.
You know what I mean? Yeah, you're
definitely part of it. I've had a few guests on here that have spoken to that, in those roles. Scott Nickel comes to mind. Brad Larson comes to mind, like guys that were big pieces of their team, but they felt like big pieces in fourth, third line roles because the leadership group or the coaches made them feel like what they did for that team was enormous. Like that one hit was huge, or that face-off win was amazing. And if you're able to contribute and you're able to feel like that, then yeah, you embrace that and you want to do it again the next game, right? So I can totally hear what you're saying there. The other thing I'll maybe add to that is given a role and then allowed to be able to step into it too. Like, it's one thing to be saying, hey, go score some goals for us, and then you're on a third line role and you're never getting on the power play or whatever, right? And it's like that's held over your head. Like sometimes it's not fair too when they ask you to do something that's really you're not able to because of the environment you're in. But I totally agree with that, especially at the NHL level. Like knowing something that you can hold on to with two hands and just say, yes, I'm going to embrace this and do as great as I can. I really think that helps the team, and coaches can make guys better. Is there you mentioned Daryl Sutter, and you mentioned owly, and I mean, for me, Brian Maxwell comes to mind about being owly, like in Spokane, and I think there was a certain type of player that really responded to that, and me maybe not so much, like because I was more of like I played better when I was dancing, kind of sitting on the bench, like that's where my mo was, whereas a Kevin Sawyer or a Jeremy Stasiak, you remember those names, like those guys, Brian McCabe, for instance, like Brian McCabe was a guest here, and he said, yeah, like Maxie taught me to play with a burr up my ass. And when I had that burr, I was at my best, So like that type of philosophy like really did work for some guys. And then me trying to play with a burr up my ass was like hard for me to do. Like I would still hit and fight because that's what I was about, but I wasn't like, if I played like this, I wasn't any good, Did you see guys come through like with Daryl Sutter in that scenario that like just couldn't quite get on board with that scenario?
I mean, there's lots of players that probably came through. We weren't always the best team, so there's a lot of changeover then. But no, I think he was a little bit different, and I think what made him really good. Yeah, for sure, there's some people that didn't love it, but I think he could recognize that and adjust a little bit on the fly with each guy. So. It would still appear to that, but then, he might talk to that guy a little bit more away, in the back room when they're just passing each other, so some guys he would talk to more, some guys less, and I thought he did a really good job of, because when I really think about it, at the time, we're not happy. I mean, we would get reamed out, and he could go around and call you out and have something in the way you're not playing and some way to get you fired up. But most guys that I played with that played for him, I think they appreciated what he did, and his purpose. And I agree with you going back to what you said too, in that, and I thought he was good. Like, yeah, if you're not playing any power play and you're not on that, then, there's a different expectation, you're not trying to live up to some unreal thing. And I thought he was really good at defining rules for people that were realistic, that in their current situation, and then, like I said, where it kind of seemed to fall apart sometimes was when, if those rules weren't defined by the coach, you don't want to tell a guy like, he's playing 7 minutes, 6 minutes. Hey, great game, man. Great game. You're really, he wants, if he doesn't feel like that's what he wants to be, and that's not his role, then you don't know as a player whether, you can say great hit or but great block shot, but you can't really, you don't know if he's happy, if he's, you know what I mean? If he's embracing it. So
Yeah.
And then that's part of the coach and the management, I guess. You find the guys that embrace it, and whether they're young guys that are just happy to be there, because the fourth line role isn't an easy job. You know, I got to see that near the end of my career, and it also was good for me to appreciate. You know, you think you appreciate it as a player when you're on one of the top lines that gets to go out more, but to actually live it, it's a lot harder job to be effective and to stay into it and to not squeeze your stick and to go out there and play free and loose and to be able to feel like you can make some errors. You don't really feel like that. And it's a much different role. And as much as I wish I never, you know, it was hard. It was like tough to go through right near the end of my career, as far as you want to be out there and you want to be in the game. And I wasn't used to it. It was really, really good for me. And that it helped me get a great understanding, appreciation for, of another role on a team, and which like I say, I thought I did, and you appreciate it, but man, it's a little bit tougher.
Yeah, until you're doing it. As you're talking about Sutter there, I saw a coaches conference with him, and he made me laugh. Somebody in the crowd asked, you know, what's the key to being a great coach? And he's like, well, the years I was a best coach, he said I had Mika Kiprasov and Jonathan Quick. So in other words, he's like, find me a good goalie and I'll show you a good coach, he said. So anyways, it was a pretty great, I mean, humble and funny response he gave. I thought that was pretty good. And I'm sure you saw that firsthand with Kipper that year. You guys had such amazing success there going on that run that you did. That was pretty wild.
Oh yeah, for sure. Just what you know, for the confidence and for the lift of a bench and really for how they can take over a game. A goalie can, it was a pleasure to get to play with them, for sure.
Powerful position in hockey. You talked about the end of your career. We haven't even gotten to Kamloops yet. And looking at your career just from a hockey DB standpoint and watching, like it seems like maybe, and correct me if I'm wrong, like was your 16-year-old year in Kamloops, even though you won the cup as a team, you know, had amazing success, but the 6 goals, you know, and the 29 points, and probably didn't get a bunch of ice time, and you're away from home, and you're going through these things. Was that like a tumultuous year for Jarome Iginla? Was that one of the tougher ones when you look back on everything?
Oh, it was very hard. It was a very hard year. So 15, I'd played up at midget and, you know, minor hockey. You know how it is. You're used to scoring goals, and everybody really goes to WHL and does well. They probably did really well in minor hockey, you know, and so, yeah, it was no different, and had a really good year, 15 the year before, playing midget and you know, scored goals and points and stuff. And then you go there and you get to play on the power play. You go there. I went to Kamloops, and I got to play, I think I got to play all the first 10 games. In minor hockey, you play all the games, you know. It's we have a game today. Great. You show up, you suit up, you play. Go there, and it's like I'm pretty sure I played most of the games in the first 7 or 8 or something like that. And then all of a sudden you start sitting out, and they're like, your game time, you're like, you're not playing today. You're like, what do you, it was like shocking. Like, what do you mean? It was so hard to watch the team play. And I only played 48 of our 72 games. And we had a really good team. You know, we did win the Memorial Cup that year. So it was a really, really good team. But, you know, like playing on the fourth line in Kamloops, you know, and play 48 out of 72, really tough on the confidence. But literally, I look back and the rotation that Don Hay had, and he was a really good coach too, and he helped me a ton. But the rotation was the first 10 minutes, you play one shift in the period. Second 10, you get another shift. So two shifts in the first period, 2 shifts in the second period. In the third, it depended how it went. So if it was I'd get 1 in the beginning of the third period for my 5th shift. And in the last 10 minutes, if we were winning lots, I'd get a regular shift. So maybe 2, maybe get 3. And if you were losing or a close game, you get no more shifts. So 5 shifts. So there's lots of games I get 5 shifts, not play. I remember sitting in the I was really mad and just, you know, just thinking like, you know, should I be here? You know, like, is this, and I remember Don Hay talking to me, and he said, it's not based on how your play is. We have to develop all the players. We have a really good team, you know, come playoffs. We'll play the guys who are playing, but right now we got to continue because there were 16-year-olds who were here before you, and they're 17, and they need to keep playing, and that's part of their system. And so I could respect that, but yeah, it was really, really challenging being away from home. you remember how the buses, like you sit up, we'd have our closest trip my first year would be 5 hours to Seattle and from Kamloops and you play the same day. And on the way home, maybe from Spokane is a 7 hour, 6, whatever it was. And you sit up, we had to sit in one seat like this and you go through the mountains and then you have to get up and go to school at 8 in the morning and you get home at 7. So man, it was a really, really tough year. It turned out really good in the end. We won, but it was good for me. It made me tougher. And I did get better as the year went on because I got to practice with all those guys and we got to practice every day as opposed to minor hockey. We were having 2-hour practices 5 days a week or 4 days a week, whatever it was. So sorry, that was a long one about it, but yeah, it was a trying year.
But I think that's because, yeah, I mean, I don't know. I think adversity is an interesting thing. And we do talk about it a lot here on the podcast because when we're in it, we want to avoid it. Like we're resisting it, right? We don't want it to be there. I mean, there's all types of, I'm sure, inner dialogue you're having. Like you said, am I even in the right spot? Why doesn't he like me? Maybe getting mad. But then usually if we get through it, like it's something that actually galvanizes us as a person. And it's something that like made us stronger, like you said, and it ends up being a good thing for you. Was there any, like, were you calling home during that time? Was like Don Hay kind of a good enough sounding board to keep you on the even keel, or where did you turn at that point?
Well, I definitely talked to my mom and I talked to my grandpa and my dad and they were very supportive and just to stick it out. But I think if I really wanted to come home, they probably would have let me come home. I remember driving to school one day thinking, and literally we get off the bus without question. 7 in the morning, you unpack the bus, all the rookies unpack the bus. Everyone else goes home and goes to sleep if they don't have to go to school. We got to be at school at 8 o'clock or 8:20. You might have slept 2 hours. We're used to sleeping. It was tough. And I remember literally exactly where I was driving to school going, I don't know if I'm going to make it 2 more years of this, because I had 16 and 17. But I did. And, going back to it, you asked about communication. It was good that Don Hay came and told me that it wasn't based on my play. He didn't just let me sit and stew about it and fester. And I was mad. I remember, I think I was actually in Spokane too when he came up and we talked about it in the stands. And, he explained that it wasn't, unfortunately, really based on my play. And, not saying I would have played all the time. It was a very good team. Shane Doan, Darcy Tucker, Ryan Huska, Nolan Baumgartner, first rounder, Nat Don McKelly played. Like, there's so many guys that played in the NHL. Steve Passmore, Jason Strudwick, Jason Holland. You know what I mean? It was like Scott Ferguson. I don't know if I said him already. There's so many guys, Brad Lukowicz, so it was a really, really good team. And it was great for me. But it was a challenge, like you say, that looking back, it was way better for me than it felt at the time. And it was good to get through it because I definitely got tougher mentally. And coming from minor hockey where it's all fun and you couldn't imagine playing 5 shifts in a game. Parents we're almost complaining if our kid isn't playing 5 shifts in the first half of the game or 10 minutes of the game, So it was a great adjustment. It was a really good experience that was tough to go through for sure.
Yeah, and it's one of those ones too, like even reflecting on it. Of course, for you reflecting on it now, and 2 Memorial Cups in where you were and 20 years in the NHL and everything else, obviously it's like, yes, that was a good thing. But it could have maybe for a different person not been a good thing. And maybe a year of minor hockey might have been where you should have been and been a power play guy and, having the more touches and being more dominant, right? And I think that's one of the things that parents struggle with now. Is trying to make that decision. I know Stacey Roost here, assistant general manager with Tampa Bay Lightning and director of player personnel for them too. He's a big believer in confidence, and I've spoken to him a lot about it. He says it's really hard to get, but it's really easy to lose. And he is a really talented son too. And he's from the mindset of like, I don't want him to go really to that next step until he's a top 6 forward. Like I'd rather have him be a top 6 and play somewhere else. And I don't think that there's really a right or wrong. And I think it is an individual thing. But it is an interesting thing to talk about because I can see both sides of that coin, right? Like that might have ruined somebody potentially being 5 shifts a game, but for you, it made you stronger. You came back that next year and got drafted 11th overall. So obviously didn't hurt you too much. And being around winning matters too, I think. That's the other thing. Like being a part of that organization probably is different than maybe being a part of the Victoria Cougars in that same scenario and getting 5 shifts a game and never winning or whatever the case may be. So I think that probably had to have had a positive effect on you, just being in that winning culture.
It did, and it was, like I say, it wasn't tough. And if I look back, I mean, it was very tough. But looking back, it was so good, and it wasn't just good for me. Like, you know, the guys before me, Shane Doan went through it. You know, like literally, we'd share that Darcy Tucker went through it. You know, like all those guys I mentioned, for the most part, they all went through it. They all had to come in and pay their dues, and that was because they were such a strong, you know, successful organization, winning the Memorial Cups. I think, you know, they won 3 and 4 years. Tyson Nash was, you know, did it there too, and so, and he was in there. We were all in the same situation, and we all played, and we went on further. So I can hear the argument, but it was good for us. You know what I mean? And we might have been successful. You know, hopefully we would have been in a different way, but you know, in another situation, and had fun playing all the time. But getting to compete hard against each other, getting to earn our ice time. We had to go to school. Some organizations didn't make kids get up and go to school. You know, they'd let them sleep in, and they wouldn't, you know, unfortunately, some of the kids didn't graduate because of those type of situations, but it made you tough. And, you know, having to go to school and be fined on our little paycheck that we get, $50 every 2 weeks, you know, if you were late or you didn't go, it made you develop some really good work habits. And, you know, coming back at 17, when I'd see other kids who waited and then come at 17, guys I played with that were, you know, pretty good players. Now they had to go through that adjustment in their draft year. And all of a sudden we felt like, oh man, we've been through a lot. You know, fortunate that year we played 100 games as a team with going to the Memorial Cup and winning it. So, you know, by playoffs, I had 48 games, and then in the playoffs, maybe you play 30 or something. So, or whatever that is, you know what I mean? 20 some. So it's still a long season.
Yeah.
But I think it was a great development model in a different way, as opposed to giving everything. You know, you really had to earn it, and you really, really appreciated it when you got it.
I appreciate you saying that. I mean, it sounds like, you know, and what we're learning there the whole time is accountability too, right? Like that, you being accountable to something greater than yourself, and like knowing that you had to get there, you had to earn every shift that you were doing. I mean, there's something to be said for that. If we go back to your draft year, Iggy, it's funny because you know what year I remember of you? I remember your last year, like the year that we played World Junior, like in my head, right? I remember the Iginla that scored a goal a game, like the playoffs and in regular season, and had the 130-point year. I don't remember your draft year as well, the year you got 71 points and 33 goals. Like, obviously that's a good year, but it's not a fantastic year stat wise. You know, like how what do you remember from that year? And did you feel like you were kind of firing on all cylinders, or was it? I mean, how did you rate that year for yourself, going as high as you did?
No, it was still like I came back, and like I said, I was excited to get to play and really appreciate to get a regular shift. And I got, in my first 5 games as a 17-year-old, I got a goal a game. So I only had 6 year before, so I was pretty pumped. I got to 5 already in 5 games, and then I went on some cold streak, you know.
Yeah.
So it was still a challenge. We had a really, really good team. It was still a challenge, and ups and downs, and you know, but it kind of. Oh, I remember actually. Sorry, I'm just trying to think back to it. And the beginning of the year, that was 17. I got to actually go to play on the under 18 team with Team Canada, and we went to Mexico and we played there. And that was a good confidence boost to get the chance to play with. That was the first time you get to play with kids right across Canada.
Yeah,
you know what I mean. So it was great there. As far as that, we played in Mexico. There's only 4 teams: Russia, U.S., Japan, and us. And we won it there. And so that was neat to see kids right across Canada and see where you are, see where guys, and that's also where the draft rankings come out, you know. And I remember seeing it, and like, I think Redline had me at like 14th, and I was pretty excited, you know, 14th overall. And then Central Scouting had me quite a ways down. And it was like, I was like, you know, probably projected 3rd rounder, but then also didn't remember they didn't include Europeans, so it was like, yeah. I don't know, it turns into a 5th rounder. So it was like I was all over the map where my draft would be. So and it gets in your head. I remember that getting in my head during my 17-year-old year, and you try not to think about it. The draft rankings come out, you fall, you move up, and I was always pretty low in Central Scouting, and you want to be. I really wanted to be a 1st round pick, but you know, so much is out of your control. And you just try to work hard, but it's hard as a 17-year-old kid, and that the pressures. But fortunately, being on a really good team with guys that were drafted in the first round, it was the same year, Donor was going through the same thing, so I could talk to him about it and watch him. He's a year older with a late birthday. So to me at that age, he was more mature and stuff, so I could like lean on him a little bit for I'm more mature now than he is, but the back then he was more mature, and I could lean on him and we could talk about it on the bus. But it's a big adjustment, and fortunately, it's a little bit up and down, but I think I also got some good exposure by playing with the Blazers, and we went on to win another Memorial Cup, and had a good playoffs. And but still, when it came draft time, my pick was it was kind of like anywhere I could go for anywhere from like 11th to the second round to it wasn't people were all over the map as far as what they saw me as a player.
Sure. Did you? Which is interesting because the contrast for you and I, right? Because at 16 with Spokane, I had 36 goals, right? So I had a really good finish and had this really kind of, a big breakout year, and played in the same thing. Like we went to Japan for ours with that under 17 team, and got to play with Jeff O'Neill and these guys, right? And see kind of where you stood out. Jason Bond Sr. was there for the U.S. and that was the first international stage to kind of see the pecking order, and then going into my draft year, I ended up scoring 29. So pretty close to you, 33, but it was less than I scored my 16-year-old year. Right. And yeah, you started seeing your name fall on the board, right? Now you're starting to feel those pressures. And, did you I definitely, for me personally, 29 was I wouldn't, if you had asked me before the season started, how many goals I would have scored, I wouldn't have said that. And I would have been disappointed. I thought I was going to get more. Did you have a number in your head going in there, that you wanted to attain to or try to get to?
Yeah, I did on my, it's kind of funny because I was on I remember on the bus, I think we were at the Memorial Cup, and we were all on the bus as a team, and it was in Montreal, Laval that year. So 16-year-old year, I was on the, and I remember, the regular season was over. I don't remember if we just won but I remember Bob Brown was there, and I don't know if someone asked me, one of the players, or was like, what do you think you'll get? And, as the goals, and he was, and it was a bus that was kind of like a transit bus. So, you're all in there, and, of course, as rookies, we're up with the management and the coaches, right? And all the other guys are in the back, but we're with them. And I remember him looking over, goes, I think you'll get 30 goals. And I remember what a big boost that was for me. I had 6, what I mean? And that was whoa, you really think so? And what did I get? 31, 33, I guess. 33.
33, yeah, 33.
But am I losing you? Can you hear me?
So we're going to have a quick cut here because we went down. The conversation went dark for about 5 minutes between Iggy and I. He had some technical difficulties with the device he was using in his headphones, but then we got all ramped back up and pressed play and continued on with his story with Bob Brown. So now back to the interview.
Yeah, and I remember on the bus there where he told me that, and it was a huge boost because coming from 6 goals, I had no idea. I mean, I didn't even know. I remember someone asking, it was another player, is that a little cocky to say 30? I don't know if I would have said 20, you know what I mean? You're going from 6, how am I, so it was cool when he said that. It gave me a ton of confidence, and yeah, I ended up with 33, but it wasn't like a smooth sailing year still. It was still a big adjustment, getting ready, for the draft and dealing with pressure and, putting that pressure on. And but I was in a really good situation, like I say, where with a lot of guys who'd been through it before, gotten drafted. Nolan Baumgartner was drafted the year before me in the first round. Nat Don McKelly was drafted in the third. Lots of guys drafted, so you can kind of go through it and learn from them. And lots of really good leaders like Ryan Huska and Jarrett Dooling, and Darcy Tucker was older guy there that and he was a competitive good leader in that sense, and fiery, and it was one of those things that it was a really, really good situation to get to be a part of as a 16-year-old, and was huge in development and helped me 16, 17, and 18. But how about you? You were saying you had 30 something as a 16-year-old?
Yeah, 36 as a 16-year-old.
That's crazy. That's cool.
Well, it was crazy. Yeah, it was crazy because I don't remember the name Scott Townsend. I was a third line center at the time, so I wasn't on the fourth line. So I was getting regular shift. I wasn't getting power play time though as a 16-year-old. And I think I had, I don't know, I'd have to do the math, and I can't do it right now in my head. But having an okay 16-year-old season, then Scott Townsend broke his jaw, and I got moved up into his spot. So I then became second line center and started playing power play, and just like the planets aligned and the stars aligned. And I think I had 19 goals in my last 17 games or something, like it was
cool.
something nuts, right? That I was just kind of blew up. And yeah, which set the stage for a draft year that maybe I wasn't quite prepared for, especially with the ups and downs of it, like to high expectations, right? Like feeling like you need to do better than you did the year before, run into some ice time issues and finding it hard to get on the ice. And anyways, it's tough. It's tough at that age. You went through it, obviously. It's hard. If things are going well sometimes and it feels good, and things aren't going well and it's not feeling so good. And that there's a lot riding on that number that you get beside your name come draft time, right? It definitely means something. I wouldn't do this podcast justice if we don't talk about the World Junior, because that was a real special time for us coming together there in Boston. It was a real Western heavy team, which I think we were kind of all a little bit proud of in our own way. We all knew each other and we had all kind of battled against each other, and then to win gold there. And that was, in my opinion, I don't know, I don't want to put words in your mouth because you haven't said that, but to me, that was like your coming out party. Like, you had an amazing season that year. A goal a game season, but you did some special things that tournament and did some special things for that team. Did you leave there going, hey man, like, I don't know. Did you feel a little different about yourself leaving that tournament?
Yeah, it was a great experience, and confidence. Thinking back, and yeah, it's a big. You said it's a big part of all players, and it was. I battled it, through my whole career, and I imagine most guys do. You wonder, really, does McDavid battle confidence? You know what I mean? Or Crosby, do they really? And I bet you even they do it just a little bit, but. Just on some days they shouldn't really, right? You'd say why, but but the rest of us, yeah. So I also remember going to the summer camp of the World Juniors, and I remember it was out in Montreal or somewhere out east when we went to that July camp, and that was pretty cool to get an invite to that, to be there with some of the top Canadian kids, 19, 18. A couple 17-year-olds, from all across Canada, and actually to be in that mix, you know what I mean? So I just gotten drafted. So that was good. I was excited. It was a thrill. But now to be there on that ice with those guys. And I remember going, to a couple sessions, one, I don't know if it was one or two. And I was walking back with Marcel Como as a coach, and he called, he was talking to me. He goes, I thought you'd have a little more, than that first day. I'm like, oh my God, really? I thought I thought it was all right, and I was just trying to, you're almost just trying to fit in. And my confidence wasn't really to try to really just, I didn't know if I'd excel there or whatever. So yeah. I remember him saying that. He goes, yeah, let's see if we can get a little more. I thought it'd be a little bit, and it kind of lit a fire under me. And I think I had a better next day. It was just, I think I had one more session. I think he did say to me after all that was better. He didn't say it was awesome or anything. He said it was better or something. But that goes back to that communication. I think as a coach, and you think back to the coaches and the different times that they talk to you, it's so important. And he could have said nothing, which would probably be easier, right? And just see how I respond. But I'm thankful he did, because it made me expect a little more out of myself, push myself, and not just try to fit in out there. And I'm not saying I was like unbelievable out there or anything like that, but it was still big that there was a little higher expectation out of me. You know what I mean? As far as he's going to talk to me, that's the coach. I'm just another guy there, but he wants to see a little more because he thought there was a little more there, Yeah. So that was a nice move by him. It was really helpful for me. And when we did get to World Juniors, yeah, like you say, that was a ton of fun. And it was like, we being a Western coach, we definitely had our Western contingent there representing from the WHL. But it was a really cool tournament. You grow up getting to see that as kids and watching everybody else at Christmas time, and we got all those faxes and everything. And like you say, it was a big experience for me though, because I also got traded in the NHL at that camp. And I remember it was just after we used to get those phone calls in the morning, if you're cut or not. So it was after the team was already made, but I got a call bright and early in the morning, and I was at the hotel, and it was Marcel Como saying, he wanted to let me know that I'd been traded. And I was like, oh. And my first thought, no word of a lie, my first thought is Kamloops. I really enjoyed Kamloops, and we won too, and and he's like Calgary. Oh, really? I just didn't even think I'd be on an NHL radar in that kind of sense, and so it was different. It was different getting traded, though. It was like, in one sense, it's a compliment that, the Calgary Flames, I was part of Joe Nieuwendyk trade, and, he was obviously a great player and rolling, and it was Corey Millen and myself, and for him, and I was a young prospect, and Calgary was going to be rebuilding. So, but one side, it was a nice compliment, but at the same time, you're like, did Dallas, did they not like what they see? Did they not, you know what I mean? So you have to try to deal with that as a teenager. And, I did talk to Bob Gainey, and he said, no, but that it was, they're going for it. They're an older team, and he was really nice and stuff like that. So it made me feel a little bit better, but, and then I talked to, Calgary, and they were really excited and going to be rebuilding, and it was a great opportunity. And, I did get to play and be a part of it early, but it was a little bit different. But then going to World Juniors, there's pressure, right? There's pressure that you have to deal with, because now people are talking about someone just got traded, or Iginla. They didn't usually pronounce my name right, but I can't blame them. It's a little different, but it was like there was some pressure in the tournament. So very, very thankful that I got to play on a great line with Damon Lankow, great player, great junior player, great player in the NHL. I got to play with him and Nat Kelly, and familiarity. We had already played in Kamloops together. And then, Baumgartner was there, Jason Holland. So lots of guys that made it easier. And then, like you said, knew you and guys that we knew. So it made it, the familiarity was so nice, because I did feel like there was a lot of pressure on the tournament, just playing for Canada, but also being part of that trade and trying to, show Calgary that they didn't, instead of the fans wondering who this is, and oh my God, what just happened, Yeah,
that was one of those interesting trades too. Now being like a fan and historian of it, because Dallas won a cup essentially. As that trade had something to do with that cup that they won. I think no one in the world would say that Calgary wouldn't make that trade again, but I wonder if Dallas would. I bet you they probably wouldn't. You came on so fast there, and were forced quite quickly, right? It's interesting, but that was kind of a win-win, I suppose. Dallas got their cup. They were looking for some older depth scoring, and they got what they wanted. And then obviously Calgary got an amazing player in yourself for a long time there, and now your jersey's in the rafters there, which is super, super amazing.
No, I think it's an interesting one, and I've been asked that and thought about it, but I think they do it again. It's and Joe Nieuwendyk ended up being I believe he was the Conn Smythe winner, wasn't he? They won it, right? So he was a huge part of it. I think that's their only cup to date right now. Obviously this year they were really close, so that's pretty special. You get that opportunity, and they've been a strong organization. But it also gave me a chance to play as a young guy and opportunities that who knows if you get them. If you get them as many that early and stuff. So. That's a
great point. Like where you land matters, too. I talked with Wade Redden, and he said, in Ottawa there, like that was a gift kind of to be there at a team that was really rebuilding, because he knew like they had to have him on that team almost as a young guy. And he knew that as he was making mistakes that he was going to go back out on the ice again. And he's like, you go to a big different organization that maybe has more depth and they don't have to have you in the lineup. Like you're not allowed as much rope, I guess, and you play a little tighter and all this other stuff. So.
For sure. I remember Al Coates who traded for me and talking to me and going into camp, and before I went in my first year, there wasn't like I was going to have a really good opportunity to play there. You know what I mean? As a 19-year-old, and I had a tough camp. Like I didn't score. I think I played 9 preseason games and I didn't get 1 goal. I think I maybe had a couple assists in my last game. Like it was like tough. It was a big adjustment at first, and who knows, right? That gave me a chance to have another look, and I had a good start as a rookie, but I don't know if I would have gotten that. So, everything works out the way it's supposed
Yeah,
to,
for sure.
I guess. And
Um, Speaking of, so getting the foot in the door, right? And that was something, that on a personal level that I struggled to feel like I was belonging there, to get through that headspace of like, now I'm on NHL ice and I am an NHLer. And when did that happen for you? It was like, was it some point in your rookie year where you felt that you were an NHLer and that you belonged there? Or was that not as hard of a transition for you?
no, it was a very hard transition for me. It was. And I think it goes like we keep saying, that confidence piece. And I was going to tell you earlier when you said, I'm like, wow, it was a confidence. I like more thinking back to it. I don't always think back on, until we get in these discussions, and it keeps coming up. And yeah, the confidence was huge. And I got off to a good start as a rookie. I got, some good bounces. We weren't a bad team in Calgary. We were right in the playoffs, right until we got eliminated with like a game left. So only our last game of the season was like when we weren't actually eliminated. So we were in the hunt the whole year. We had some really good players. Theo was there, and Steve Chason, and Zarya Zlapsky, and Dave Gagne. Like, we had a good team. It was we were in the mix. But I remember thinking how strong these guys were. Like going up the ice, and like when someone would get a hold of you, it was in that clutch and grab era. It was like you couldn't get away. And I just, compared to junior, when by the time you're older, you're playing against younger players. You can kind of use your muscle, and you can try to out-muscle them. And I was getting out-muscled everywhere. And like, if they got a hold of me, like Darren Hatcher in the corner or Matvichuk, is like, I was going nowhere, So I remember thinking like, man, they're so strong, everyone. And it was a big adjustment. And my rookie year wasn't bad at the end of the year. So I got off to a good start. But my last 17 games, I don't know why. I don't know if you get tired or whatever. I had 21 goals. I remember getting 2 goals in my last game. It was actually, I think it was against Dallas, to get to 21 from 19. Now, it was like feeling good. And I had 48 points, and and then in my last 17 games, I got no goals, nothing, and then I did get 2 points, I think, in like my last game to get to 50. But in my head, I was going to 60, 70, maybe 30 goals, keep going. And it just stopped pretty abruptly, and it carried into the next year. Well, it didn't really carry into the next year. I got injured in my sophomore year. So I hurt my hand just on a hit. I got hit into the boards, and it just kind of, the glove caught, and it just broke a bone in my hand, and I missed a decent amount of games, and I only scored 1 goal in the year after. So I had 12, and then I got 1. So I ended with 13. It was a pretty tough year, and we weren't very good that year. We were rebuilding for sure. A lot more pressure on everyone. New coach. Pierre Pagé was there my rookie year, and he gave me great opportunities, and it was a fun year all the way around. Some great veterans, lots of rookies that I grew up with there. And the next year, going into a rebuilding year, was tougher. It was a lot more like new coach. Brian Sutter came, and it was just a tougher year to get and then the confidence. It was tough. It was about long answer, but it took years to actually feel like, I belonged in the NHL, and
Right.
there's times I didn't think I would be a goal scorer in the NHL for sure.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I was looking at that second year, and I was wondering that too, because I know that you've mentioned Shane Doan's name a couple of times, and I interviewed Danny Briere on this show once, and he's really good buddies with Doaner, and talked about Doaner like being sent down at one point after being in the NHL for 2 years, and then kind of having to come up. And obviously, he had a phenomenal career himself there, but it was all filled with adversity at the start. You never played a game in the AHL, so you never had to go down there. But did you ever think that maybe in that second year that could have been on your radar?
Yeah, and they talked about it kind of like the third year when I went back. In my third year, in the Brian Sutter maybe mentioned it a little bit, or I don't know if it was a threat, but it was probably a real possibility. And I didn't want to go down, and and then the third year is like you're putting a ton of pressure now. Like, it's like to try to get in, try to solidify myself as an NHL player. And I remember thinking like, I think I could do it. I believed I could be an NHL player. I was already an NHL player, but earn that spot. But I didn't know if I'd be able to earn that spot as a goal scorer. Like I definitely had some doubts, and I remember wondering that, and I remember I remember praying like, Lord, thanks that I got here, and it's been great. I'd like to keep. I didn't want to go to the minors. You know what I mean? I didn't want to go, and it's all right if I'm not gonna, be a goal scorer. Thanks for helping me get here. And then I think I went on a tear, and I gained some confidence, and I got to 28 that year, which was a big boost for me. But I think I had a slow start and picked up, and it started coming together, and you overthink things. You know how it is. You burn all your energy before you get to the game. You're like thinking of, how you need to feel perfect, and the stress, and trying to live on your own as a with your I lived with two other players, but nobody was, I had great billets and Kamloops and stuff, and nobody's making me dinners, and am I eating right? Am I sleeping right? All that stuff. It's a big adjustment, and it started to come together. I guess maybe I matured and got some breaks and all that stuff. But I was very thankful that it did, because I do think I was close to going to the minors, and who knows what that path is. And it worked for Donor, and he obviously great. But some guys it can be a big change.
Was there a point when you, like, once you got there, it almost seems like you stepped into that all-star, it wasn't that too many years after that you ended up scoring 50 and were recognized as one of the game's best players. Is there ever like a light switch moment where you realize that you're one of those guys that, kids have a poster of on their wall, and like you're one of the stars of the game? Like, did you ever feel like the arrival into that stratosphere?
No, I don't think you ever get not real. Getting 50 was pretty cool. That was one that, like, there, I think that year it was only, so that was cool, because I saw a lot of guys I looked up to. That was a very special year. That was the Olympics 2002, and that year, obviously, now again it was confidence. I wish I knew, and then what I did, I would do more focus on that mental side. Hey, but. Are you there, Pods?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Oh, okay. You froze there, so I wasn't sure if it was my thing again. But that year I got why I went down that was I got a late invite to the Olympic camp in Calgary, and Simon Gagne got hurt. He had a groin after the first day, and I got a call, and I got a late invite. I always believed it was called because I was the closest guy, kind of. I lived in the area. I was actually up in Edmonton, but I came in the second day, and I went to that camp, and that was a huge boost to be on the ice with, Eric Lindros and Joe Sakic and Steve Yzerman, all those guys, shooting on Brodeur, and, to be in there with the actual guys that I'd been watching growing up. And I didn't light it up by any means. It wasn't like that. It was just that I held my own, like I was on there playing with them, and I had a couple scoring chances and didn't get any points, but I was like, I had a scoring chance, and it was just such a huge boost going into the start of the season, because that year before I had gotten to 31 goals and 70 points. So I was starting to get better and to feel a little bit more confident. But no, I never, viewed myself in thinking I was going to be on the Olympic team the next year. You know what I mean? It was just like, just trying to build, get better. And when I got that call, it still didn't think like I knew I was a late call. It wasn't like, I'm going to play on the Olympic team. It was just a huge boost going into the season, playing at that speed, playing with those guys. And I got off to a great start, played with my buddy Craig Conroy, centerman, and we had great chemistry, and we got off to a great start of that season. And it really just rolled through the season, and then made the Olympic team. And it was a very, very special year, and one I'll never forget. And getting to be on the team with Joe Sakic and Yzerman and Marilyn Mew, McInnes, guys that, like, I was on literally, how it is, you're on the bus watching Rock'em Sock'em hockey, and these guys are all their highlights at the end, and all the best goals of the year, you're watching them. And now, it feels like time flies by. I'm 10 years later, they're still all in the NHL, and I'm on a team with them in the same dressing room. It was really, really cool, and I felt like a big kid for sure.
Right. That's interesting. So the 2002 year, you still felt like, I guess naturally you would. You still felt like almost, I wouldn't call it a fan, but you felt like a kid, right? You're with these guys that were your heroes, and now you're on their team.
I would call it a fan. Yeah, I was a fan. I walked into that dressing room and see their jerseys. I was a fan, and I wanted to get jerseys signed by them, but I was hopefully I was a little bit cooler than I didn't come across quite like a fan, but inside, yeah, absolutely.
I try and bring that up because it's like the life cycle of hockey is so strange, right? Because at 10 years old, like the 10-year-olds right now are watching, whatever. Now it's Connor McDavid or these guys, right? That they will, like the good ones, will play with Connor McDavid, right? Like, so you go from that 10-year-old fan with eyes like this, and like they're your heroes. Like for me, it was Mario Lemieux. Like if I would have played in a team with Mario Lemieux, like I had to play against him, which was super cool. Like play with him would have been ridiculous. I would have a really hard time figuring out how that was supposed to work, right? Because you just look up to these guys so much. And then, but that life cycle happens, especially if you're in the game as long as you were. And then you became that guy that kids were like, oh my gosh, I'm playing with Jarome Iginla, and that's like that circle is an interesting thing. And maybe that's a good segue into leadership, because at some point you become a guy that's just playing in the game. You're participating, you're trying to find your way. And now you're looked at to be the leader of 20 other professionals, and maybe to be a spokesperson for a town and a city. How was that maturing process and stepping into that role?
Well, hey, I'm just thinking of Mario Lemieux. I'll tell you a quick story. I got to play with him. I was a huge fan too, and I got to play with him on the World Cup team for Team Canada, and I got to be on his line, and I got to play on the line with him and Joe Sakic, and it was so cool, and like it was, but it was kind of funny because I'd go, if I missed him on a pass, I'd come off, I'd be like, hey, sorry, Mario, like, you know what I mean? Or if I lost a battle in the corner, you get him, sorry, Mario. Finally, he says to me, will you stop saying sorry? It's a game of hockey. We don't say sorry. I'm like, oh, sorry. Like it just to find that adjustment, it was like, but they were awesome leaders, and going into the leadership side, those guys were such humble guys that, you played with them. They loved the game of hockey, and they were great examples, and getting to be on that O2 team with them really helped me in learning, about leadership and trying to grow. And I played with lots of great leaders and great teammates that you learn a little bit from in different areas. But these guys, Joe Sakic. So if you remember our first game against Sweden, it's way back, you may not, but we lost big in 0-2. First game against them, we were supposed to be a powerhouse, and big game against Sweden. I think they beat us 5-1 or 5-2 or something, and just thumped us. Mm-hmm. And the lines changed. And my line the first day was pretty cool for me. I was thrilled. I played with Steve Yzerman, I believe, and Brendan Shanahan. That's pretty cool. I was like, this is great. Then, but Joe Sakic, he was playing with Mario Lemieux and Paul Kariya. So the next day, when the lines came after that first game, we come to the rink and there's adjustment. The lines are all shaken up, and now I'm on the line with Joe Sakic and Simone Gagne. I'm a young guy. Great, cool. But then I'm thinking to myself, oh, geez, Joe Sakic must not be too happy, like he goes from playing with, no offense to Simone, but we're the two youngest, forwards. It's like, that's a big difference, right? But his leadership, he comes over right away. And, right after the meeting, they did the meeting, and he comes over, he goes, hey, guys, I'm real excited to get a chance to play with you young bucks. We're going to be great. We're going to have a good line, fast, and, bring that energy. And right there, that little one thing he says, it disarms it. I'm not thinking, oh, he's not, like I'm feeling good about myself. And I think Simone probably is too, and excited. And it totally changes the dynamic of the line and the confidence of us as a group. And, he went on to have obviously he was MVP of the tournament. He had a great tournament, and we had a good line, and the team won. But I think that was a big part of it. And that was his leadership, a subtle thing. And he was such a humble guy, but for him to know, he probably recognized that we're probably thinking this, which I was. I'm like, do you really? Yeah.
That's a great story. That is an awesome example too, because that's understanding this. That means the psychology, the person, right? The person behind the player again. Like that. These guys might need something here, and I'm going to give it to them. That's pretty powerful. And then you put that in your back pocket. I'm sure you use that later. I mean, young guys coming up or whatever the case may be, try and get people feeling comfortable and feeling a part of things.
Yeah, you try. Yeah, and there were so many leaders on that team. You go through it, and that's what those Team Canada. That was a pretty special one where, I was a young guy, and you just watching them and Yzerman and how they all carry themselves, how they all enjoy coming to the rink, and the enthusiasm they have. And we lost that first game big time, and it was like, to me, it's like the world. In Canada, the world is, you lose like that. it's a big deal. You know, it's embarrassing and you have a lot of pressure, and those guys didn't show it. They were like, that's one game. Don't worry about it. They got back to work, you know, and it ended up working out. We won, but it was neat to get to spend that time with them and just look at them all and watch them. And they were humble guys, but they worked hard too. I remember saying that, and it was like, I always thought these guys were talented players, and, you know, like, you know, it's Mario Lemieux, it's you know, Joe, they're kind of born like that. They work when you play and you see it. And now I don't think that anymore at all. I know they worked extremely hard, but when you see it up close in their preparation and what they do in the stretching and getting to see that as a young guy and how they approach it and how they work out, it was a gift as a young guy to get to play with them and get to see that it is a ton of hard work and probably mostly hard work that goes with the talent that they have and the God-given gifts. But they were the best players. They all, you know, getting to play with Crosby and McKinnon and you're looking at, you know, you get to ask them what they did when they're younger, and they all did a ton. They did a ton, and they work hard now. They work hard then. They work hard in their practices, and they're better, to me, I believe, because they've worked harder.
Was since we were talking about Mario a little bit, that storyline, there was the 04, the one where he let that puck, that pass go through his legs, like right in the slot, and it went back to Korea backdoor, and Korea buried that. Was that the tournament?
Yeah, Salt Lake, the Olympics there. And he let that go in that big game. That was in the finals. That was in the finals, or he let that one? Who doesn't shoot that, eh? If he coming near me, I'd be like, oh yeah, you know. Like, to see the guy and have that confidence to leave it to go right through to him back. That's pretty cool. He was so on those teams, when you do one-on-ones and stuff, you know how one-on-ones are against, after you get past bantam, it's pretty tough to beat a guy on a regular, well-gapped one-on-one, right? Like, it's really hard. But he was the only guy that could beat the defenseman regularly on a one-on-one. Like, he was so skilled, Mario Lemieux. It was like, and I remember asking him, he'd be like, yeah, just, you know, all I do, I just drive down. As soon as I see their feet turn, I turn it when it turns the feet. You know, for him, it was that easy. It never works. Really? That's it? You know, and that never worked for the rest of us. But, he was so talented. He was, he was the most, it was pretty neat to get to play against him and see it up close. And his skill level was, and the way he thought the game, he was so talented. To go with his whole game was just amazing.
Yeah, we always get the questions of eras and who would do better when and all this and all that. And I mean, the physicality side for yourself, like the power forwards back in the 90s and the 2000s, there was more of players like you. You know, you were one of the cream of the crop from that generation, but there's less of them now. Do you think like yourself implanted, or maybe it'd be easier to say not talk about yourself. Let's say Eric Lindros in today's game, or Mario Lemieux in today's game. Who do you think's more successful? Who do you think has a bigger impact in the game?
Well, I think Mario Lemieux has a big impact. Like, Eric Lindros was awesome player, and at the height of it, he was like unbelievable. So I think both of them would be extremely, extremely successful wherever. You know what I mean? Eric Lindros would dominate now. They would, all that. But I think Mario Lemieux, like, to me, I think he's probably the most dominant player that I like. And I got to see him when he was older. You know what I mean? Like, this was after he'd come back and he'd been through, you know, the back surgery. You know what I mean? Like, he had it was unbelievable how good he still was. Like, I couldn't even imagine. But Eric Lindros was he was so big and talented. You know, when he was younger, he had some injuries and stuff. Before he had any of the injuries, it was like, I remember being on the ice in my first few years with him, and you're like, how do you stop this guy? You can't hit him. Like, he's good. You go to hit him, it hurts you more for sure. You'll fly. He could shoot the puck way harder than everybody else. So I don't know about that. Like, I think those guys completely dominate just the way they did back then. Like, I think they were dominate either era, whatever. I don't think that those guys. I don't think the game. I think the game is quicker in the sense that the bottom, the fourth line, the 7th, 6th, 5th defensemen, they can all skate way better and everything. So it is definitely quicker, but I don't know that the higher top end speed is that much faster than Pavel Bure or Teemu Selanne were when they were flying around. You know what I mean? Like, I still think, and I don't know that they shoot the puck harder than Eric Lindros. I don't know that anybody shoots the puck harder than he could shoot it, you know, like his size, and like, it's still, and not that he shot it harder than them now. I just don't know that I know the one slap shot, but Z was able to do that. Char was able to do that 10 years ago. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
That's not like it's but their overall speed is faster. But I think those guys were, they're two. You picked two great guys that were so dominant.
And the only reason I brought it up though is because like there's without question less physicality in the game. Like there's not as many hits, there's not as much net front battle, there's less fighting, and you can't hold up. So like a guy like a Tom Wilson is super effective now. A guy like Zach Kassian super effective now. And come playoff time, they're even more effective because that's when you're allowed to maybe play a little meaner. I think it would be interesting to implant a guy like Lindros into today's game and just watch him wreak havoc, right? Because no one's used to it. Like no one's used to a guy being a wrecking ball out there and being that good. Whereas a guy like Mario Lemieux, who's that talented and that big, and no one can hold him up and no one can hook him, like that would be scary to watch too. So I think they would both be interesting to watch in today's game. But
yeah, it would be fun, and I agree with you. I like, what do you do with Eric Lindros, and like you can't hold him walking out of the court? Either one, like it would be, and we're probably going to get to see some there's some there's going to be some other power forwards coming. I think it still serves a big purpose in the game, and I don't think it's we'll get those again. I think
the pendulum's going to swing back. I think I think like the cup win with St. Louis, big heavy team, right? Like Boston was a heavy team when they got to the final. Tampa learned their lesson and got a little tougher, a little grittier, right? They won the cup now this year. Like I think, it's starting to, the pendulum's starting to shift a little bit. I think to get a little of that power back in the lineup, but it's easier said than done too, because you got to get in the playoff in the first place. And right now, the regular season isn't a game for lots of size and toughness. You got to get into it.
Yeah, that's right. I'd like to see them call. I thought it was better. Like, you don't want it too extremes. I don't like if you call everything and then nothing. You know what I mean? I think it has to be a little bit closer to where you let a little more go so that a team can have, that success. And I'm a little biased because I felt like that happened a little bit with Calgary, right? Like they had a couple of years ago, they had a really good regular season team, and they probably weren't as gritty at the time. They're a lot grittier now. And come playoffs, it becomes a little bit different. So, yeah, I think it should be, they find that consistency in there. And I like, obviously, a little bit more of the physical play. And I think the playoffs are, as most hockey fans, it's tough to beat.
Yeah, it is tough to beat. I'm gonna close with something that I think we have to touch on. I know you've been so gracious with your time, and we're already over that 90-minute mark, so we'll let you go. But I want to touch on diversity because it's a huge thing. The idea that we're stronger together, right? That inclusion is a big part of the NHL. Yourself, with a father from Nigeria and identifying as a person of color, how do you feel? One, your involvement with the game was, I guess, maybe would be a good starting point. Did you feel included? Maybe to start there, and then what else can we do moving forward to make sure that we're doing the right things as a collective group?
Yeah. So my story, being a young Black player and a young minority, growing up in hockey, I knew I was the only pretty much I was aware of it, that I was the only Black player on my team, but my teammates now, I was very blessed. So it's hard because my story isn't the same as everybody has a different story. Every player has a different story, and a lot of Black players had a lot tougher situations than I did. So growing up in Edmonton and St. Albert, there, I had great experiences, and there's a couple where, fans, I can think back, and one, at a game where people were a little bit offside, not a little bit, I shouldn't say a little bit. I'm thinking two stories at once. One was a kid in a lineup in my first year, 7 years old, my first year of hockey. I can remember where it was, and it was in Alberta, and the kid said, he turned around in the lineup as we were waiting for a concession stand, after the game. And he goes to me, "Well, why are you playing hockey?" And like, I remember telling my mom after, what's, what I mean? Like, and I could tell what he meant, he was 7 years old. And I remember my mom telling me, well, it's what, ignorant and don't worry about it. It's game for everyone. Look at Grant Fuhrer and all that. And it bothered me because I can remember exactly where I was. You know what I mean? But that was the one. And he was just he was a kid. And it wasn't as harsh as what other people have been through. But it obviously got seared in my memory, because I literally remember almost pretty much what he looks like. He's at 7 years old, and where I was in the concession in the rink, and it was my first tournament. So all those things. So it does have an imprint for sure. But also, there'd be sometimes at some games where maybe fans, and this is not often, where fans were, maybe saying something inappropriate, and I couldn't hear them. But I would, sometimes I'd find out after. And it's maybe once in hockey, or that I can remember, maybe once in baseball. And then, one of my good friends, his dad would go over and talk, or, go stand by him and talk, or tell him it's inappropriate. He's a big guy. And it meant a lot to me. It was really, really powerful. I've said the story before, but it was really powerful that it wasn't my mom having to go over, or it wasn't my grandpa or my dad, if he was there, that had to go over and stick up for me, or, as a family, because they should do that. And your family's going to. But it was really, really powerful that a teammate's dad did, and that it made it feel like, that I did belong. And that guy was being completely offside and ignorant, and, was wrong, so it was really special. And so I would definitely say if those situations come up and people see things that are inappropriate, if you could still, it goes a long way when another family or another teammate stands up and says something, as opposed to just that family or that teammate. And, it doesn't have to be, he wasn't rude to the guy. I don't even know exactly what he said, but they never ever got it. But that was special, and it was very, very helpful. But as far as I know, there's players who had a lot tougher experiences than I've had. And so I look back, I had amazing experiences in hockey, and my teammates were great to me, and I loved every bit of minor hockey, and and minor baseball, and all those things. And I was very, very blessed to have a much smoother path than a lot of other kids, and other black kids and other minorities. And so, but I also was really proud of the NHL when they did that in the playoffs, and they got together and they stood together, and all the players, when they had the press conference and they were arm in arm, and I love that. And I love that more, they're speaking out, and not just the black players, but all the players. And it's important that it's not just the black players. It's and also to hold more people accountable, and things that are offside in a dressing room, if they're said, the more people like Crosby and Taves and Bergeron and all those guys that have spoken up, along with Dumba, Reeves, that they're doing it together, it'll make them all more accountable, and make sure that the locker room, and just to each other, even, it's a much bigger, there's systemic stuff they have, you have to fix in society and all that. I do believe that. And I do believe, and I'm supportive of the Black Lives Matters movement. But I think in hockey, I think having all the players step up and talk and talk about it, it makes them more accountable and more aware when things are in the future. If there's things, and I'm sure there will be sometimes, that are inappropriate, that are borderline, that shouldn't be in a dressing room, it shouldn't be in a conversations, and the way we treat people, and they'll be more accountable to each other, and also for kids to see that, and that it isn't. But to get more, there's lots of issues, in I'd love to. It's a great game, and want to see the game more accessible to. People ask me that question: how do you, get more black people playing hockey, black kids playing hockey? And the game does need to grow, and it does need to be more accessible to kids. And so there's so many issues, but it's an important issue, obviously, and one that it's and getting to be involved in hockey, and to be a coach, and you feel like you just try to make a little bit of difference too, and wherever you can, and trying to make it a better locker room, and kids be more aware of each other, and what's appropriate, what's not appropriate, and going back to where we started an hour ago or whatever it was, and trying to treat people the way we want to be treated, and respecting each other.
Yeah, no, that's thanks for sharing. Kevin Weeks has been on. I've talked to Nathan Lafayette. I've talked to some of my previous teammates, people, teammates of color, and it's really changed the perspective for me of just even thinking about what it was like for them to be in that locker room, which I never thought of that at the time, that this was somehow a different experience for them, because I never saw anything. I never saw anything that was inappropriate or offside in all my, in my 10 years playing. That doesn't mean that nothing ever happened, but I felt that that's one of the sides, and you sharing that, that you said you had a couple of things that definitely that imprinted you, and how powerful that is, right? Like that something at 7 years old from another kid can be that big of an imprint on you and have that effect that it's worthy of the discussion, So like, thank you for bringing that up, because I don't know. I don't know what else we can do. I know Taves and Crosby and some of these white guys were feeling like, what am I supposed to say? Like, what am I supposed to say? Because I don't really understand. I don't agree with what happens sometimes. I don't really know what to say. And I think the conversations are a big starting point for people who don't understand, and just allowing players to tell their stories and listen with open ears and be empathetic and essentially have a zero tolerance, which is what you said kind of back a little bit, right? It's like, we just can't accept it collectively. Like it's not that you can't accept it, it's that I can't accept it. It's that coach on the other team can't accept it. Like, if we hear something, it's just got to be, no, this doesn't happen here, right? This just does not happen. And I think when we get to that spot, that's got to be a safer place for everybody. And then we become more inclusive and it becomes more accessible. Correct?
I agree. Yeah. And that's, there's obviously bigger issues and different things and as far as society and growing. But right now in hockey and what we can impact, and what could Crosby, I thought it was great. And I thought when all those guys, and then, when Bergie and Bergeron and said, they won't be silent, and I think that makes people more accountable in the dressing room when you spend a lot of time together and you want it to be, it has to be, it should be a safe environment all the way through, and enjoyable. It's an amazing sport it's a sport where it's got so many neat personalities. A good hockey team, when you think back to every good hockey team you had on it, it was a variety of personalities. It wasn't everybody the same. It wasn't everybody dry. Some were drier, some had dry sense of humor, some would just joke all the time. And that's what makes it a special, that's what makes a locker room and a team special. It is. And that's in hockey, is all the different nationalities and so yeah, it can be improved upon but I think having everybody stand up and talk about it is a good start, and it's going to help. And when people hear something now, their antenna, they'll be like, that's not okay. You know what I mean? And you said it wasn't going to be okay. So I think it does hold everyone a lot more accountable, and as it should, and makes us more aware too of what is acceptable and isn't acceptable, and just keep working to get better.
Yeah, no, I think that's well said and well put. Scott Nickel maybe said it well. You said we're not all the same, and Scott Nickel said you can't have 20 milk drinkers on a team.
yeah. There's a balance though, eh? You can get too many wild guys, and it could go south too, right? And you get too many boring guys, and then it's boring, right? So that mix, and that's what all those GMs are trying to find between those top teams. Are so close, and how do you find that? And it just comes together at certain times.
No, I hear you. Well, Iggy, you've been gracious. Super thankful for you spending time with us and sharing, whatever your story, right? Your story and some of the reasons of what made you become the player you became and the person you became, and now the coach and parent that you've become too. So really appreciate your time and awesome getting to hang out with you for 90 minutes. Thanks for doing this.
Hey, thank you. And hey, I know you said I was like 60 minutes. That's 90 and 60 now. I want to keep going. I do want to say for the kids, I know you have a lot of kids that listen, and when you're aspiring, absolutely, to work to get better, it is possible. But it's a ton of practice. And, if kids ever wonder, at home, just going to practice and working hard, that's awesome. But that's expected if you want to get really good. You got to do stuff at home, and you got to do stuff away from the rink. That's how, and the other guys are too. So, you know what I mean? And some days it's not all fun. We were talking about it being like, working, it's just fun. no, it's hard work some days. It is hard work to get yourself out and get yourself in a routine to go out there and practice regularly and to shoot pucks regularly. So whether it's charts or whatever it is, put those together, because you all need a little bit of motivation one time or another. And but it is, and I love the game. I love sports, and I like kids seeing, getting better. But I do get asked that a lot, and I know we talked about it earlier. We touched on it briefly. It's a lot of practice, and it is fun, but there is work in there, as you know. Hey, there's days where you grind it, and then it's fun being better on the ice. So, get to work if and have fun doing it, I guess, right?
I guess, yeah. Can I ask one question on that, one follow up? Because I think it's I'm sure you've had it too. But at what age is the onus on the player to do that, and the parental intervention, or prodding or pushing? Like, should the parent ever be involved in that? Should there be support from the parent to get them doing the extra, or do you think that's coming from the player and the player should own that?
Well, do you have much time? Do you have, Pods? You just sent me down another one. When I was younger, I always got paid for my goals and assists, and my grandpa always gave me, it was kind of funny. As I got older, it was like $5 for a goal, a couple bucks for an assist, or $1 for assist. It used to be like $2 for a goal, $1 for assist. As I got older, you didn't score as many; it was more. But I loved it. And I love to score goals. I love to get points. I love the game of hockey. But it made it even more fun, and we were at good teams in St. Albert. We won different provincial championships, and we blew out a lot of teams. But in those games, when we would be winning 8-1, I wasn't bored. I couldn't wait to get back on the ice and try to get another goal, because it's fun to score, but also because it was more money, So with our own kids, we pay them, we continue that on, and it's kind of funny. People are always like, really? And now they don't care, but they like it's it's kind of fun. They keep a tab at the end of the year. They they collect or whatever. But I do believe in giving them extra incentives, and my wife has made a lot of charts for them over the years. When they were younger, 8, 9, 10. How many pucks to shoot. If you shoot 100 here, you cross it off on the calendar. Maybe there's. But I do believe in incentives, because any way you can make it more fun. Like, some people are like, oh no, I just want it to all be natural and just and that might work, but that's not what we believe. You know what I mean? And I think that the more that you can just find ways so you keep those kids engaged in games where they blow teams out. My son can't wait to get on there. He seems like he can't wait to get on the ice and try to rack it up like I wanted to too. And it's a bigger bill, and to be like, hey Dad, I just made $14 that game. It was a huge game, that might be a 7-goal game, or no, he doesn't score 7 goals. It's not like that. 7 big, $2 a goal, I think we pay, or something like that. My wife keeps track of it. And then also today we had our rink here for the first time, and it was an outdoor rink. And this might be a little bit on that vein that you're talking about, is that I said to my wife earlier today, I looked out on the ice, and the two sons, they had their drills going. They were going, doing stuff, turn backs through the pylons, cut back, take it to the net, and do all that. And I said to her, and I get out with them a lot, and I go through, shooting, but now mostly I just give them ideas or do fun stuff like one-timers and everything. But I used to do more stuff with them. But I said to her, if I tried to put them through those drills, they'd be tired. They would do it 4 times. They're out there doing it 16 times. I'm like, why? I'm like, oh my God, like, they can't see me. I'm up in the window watching, But it's like, I think they're getting to at 14 now, and 12 it's getting more self-driven, and because it's going to be a ton of work if they, to get where they dream to go. And it can't be just me like grinding them. It can't be. I don't believe that that'll actually work. So that was just a thought on what you were saying. Is today, I remember I said that to her. It was like, look at that. Like, I'm staying out of it. So I'm starting to stay out of it more and let them go. But if that's, if there needs to be my wife drew those charts and everything. I don't know what else. If we have to come up with something else, I guess we'll work on it at the time if they like it, But to try to keep encouraging them and having fun and not over critique them after games and and things like that. All those things you hear about all the time. But yeah, I love talking about that. I love talking about.
No, it's fun because there is that eternal. I shouldn't say it's an eternal battle, but there, you talk about the external motivator, the extrinsic one, right? The goals, the money, right? And then there's the internal, the intrinsic, right? That this makes me feel good, right? I'm going to be on the ice and I want to get better, right? And I think most of us probably want our kids to do it for themselves, right? Like they get that internal kind of sense of joy and gratitude and confidence from what they're doing. Like the actions that they're taking is making them better, but the external part shouldn't be forgotten about. And I think that was a good reminder that there is, as a pro, you get rewarded, extrinsically, you get fame, you get the fame, you get the, you get the fans, you get more money, bigger contract, longer terms. I mean, all these things happen for producing and playing well. So there's external motivators. But if you don't have the internal, I think that's when it just doesn't happen. If you're not internally driven, you're gonna have a hard time having success long term, I think. So it's good to find the balance there.
It is, and I think that also is important, and that what I'm trying to find is that they also you want, if they have a dream, right, and they want to do it, you want to help them along it, but you also, like you said with your son earlier, is you also want to show them, like, it's like you don't want to leave like so for example, our youngest son Joe, when he wasn't that into hockey, was like fine, he liked it, he did, but we wanted him to stay good enough so that if he really did like it, he could have a chance to really like it and be good. So you can kind of help them along the way, I think, and they have to, you can't stay right out of it, right? Like you want to pass on some of your goal scoring stuff and your shot. You had a great shot, and your skating, like, so it is that balance, hey, where we want to still be able to give them some knowledge, but where's that balance about too much? Hey, some great books I read. Have you read The Talent Code?
No, on my list though. My list.
It's good. Yeah. It's, for this stuff, it's neat, and it's if you can help the kids get into it, is what it believes. You know what I mean? The myelin that it's building, and I really believe in that stuff. And it's like when they're on, if you can get them focused, it's just such a big difference than just time in, right? And that's what I've seen in a lot of the kids that I've gotten to see over the last 4 years get better, and ones that don't get better as quick as the others, they just don't seem to be. They do a lot, they just aren't into it as much as the other kids. So it's important to try to find those little things you can trigger it and helping them be into it.
That myelination is that's getting into almost kind of like deliberate practice, right? Like the 10% kind of, just to make that neural connection just be stronger, right? So it becomes a quicker response time. I see that with have you guys have the super deker in your house? Have you ever had? Do you know what that is?
Yeah.
So Hudson bought one, like I told you, my crazy 11-year-old with his own money, right? And like him and his little brother, who's the other forwarder in there, and they're just like super competitive, right, against themselves and against each other. And it's wild to see the difference, like from 4 weeks ago till now. The patterns, right, and like putting in the time and being deliberate about it, and like, gosh, it's so crazy. One thing maybe we'll end with, or maybe I'll get your opinion on it, is. Sometimes parents come to me and ask questions, right? Like, oh, Johnny doesn't want to shoot pucks, or when I tell him something, he gets resistant, and I'm fighting with my kid, and I don't want that. And nobody does want to fight with their kid. I found even with coaching kids and even like parenting my own kids, is asking them what type of support they want. Like, how do you want to be supported?
That's a good point.
And then, because then when they agree to it, and I think you'll probably relate to that from hockey, right? Like when collectively 20 people agree that this is the standard we're going to create and this is the direction we want to get to, now you're accountable to it because you're a part of the process.
Yeah,
right.
That makes sense. Yeah, I like that.
So when you ask them, like you ask, whoever, like a Hudson, well, how do you want after a game? Like, what do you want me to say? Do you want me to tell you all the good stuff? Do you want to hear some stuff you can work on, or and they'll tell you, and I think. For me, that's been successful as a dad and as a coach, because different guys are going to tell you different things, and I think if you can operate with their language, you can get that 10% more out of them, I think.
Yeah, I like that for sure. That sounds good. And then the other was is I was thinking is from a couple of those books like that, and it makes sense, is the practice for parents is the worst thing it says, and I kind of agree with it, is that we shouldn't, the kids, if they want to reach for their goal and you want to help them get to their goal and just get better and all those things, is they can't be in trouble for not practicing, because it's such a, so you want to encourage them. And this what, I believe that it's obviously everyone does their own thing, but you want to encourage them, but they are not in trouble for not practicing. It's more like, well, if you want to get to where you want to go, it's kind of like what you say, where you have a talk with them, but it's going to probably take this, as opposed to not be in trouble, because you don't want to take the fun out of that. It seems like it takes the fun out of a sport really quickly. You know what I mean? Like it is like, and that should be extra. So it's different if you want to, like some parents aren't happy with their kid not competing on the ice or trying hard or whatever. I get that. But the practice at home, the extra, is like, I think that should be encouraged, and different ways you can help them be motivated. But I don't think they should ever be in trouble for not doing extra. And it's a sport. It's made to be fun. And I think that's just not and then those, it's kind of like it turns them off pretty quick. And you know what I mean? And then even they go out, what is it, begrudgingly, to do it, where they just go through the motions. It's not the same. So they're wasting their time, and now you're mad. So I would definitely think to parents, as a coach and stuff, is not to, force them to do it.
Yeah, isn't it great? It's so fun having kids involved in the game. I've said that on here before. Like, it brings you back to the game with a whole different perspective, right? With a whole different lens of how you see things. And I've loved it, actually. I mean, I think I loved it as much, if not more, helping them and being a part of their journey and what makes them tick and what makes them smile, and helping other kids too. Like, I love the aspect of being a coach. I think it's so rewarding. Like, it's so fun. Yeah, you don't get to compete and live and die like we did. And, it's not our on the ice, but it is theirs, and it's their dreams, right? And you've said that a few times, right? Like, that really, I think, as a coach, and definitely as a parent, that like my job's to support dreams. Like, what are your dreams, man? And like, I want to help you get there, and I'm going to do the best I can to help you. So I know that you're in the same boat there. And again, we'll cut you off, because I told you we could do this forever, Iggy. You didn't even believe me. We could keep going, but we'll let you go. I know it's getting close to bedtime there, and your dog probably has to go pee. I hear him barking, so you got to get him out the door.
Sounds good. Well, thanks, Pods. It's nice talking to you, man. Thanks for having me on.
What a conversation with Mr. Jarome Iginla. Iggy, thank you so much. If you happen to listen to this, or really am appreciative of your time. It was funny. We joked about it a little bit during the conversation, if you heard, but before we got on the air, over the email leading up to the conversation, Iggy was like, I told him to book, 60 to 90 minutes. And he said, yeah, everything sounds good. But he's like, geez, that sounds like a long time. And, which is, the case, right? That's it. I can't believe how long these interviews go. And there is some hesitation from all the guests when I say, 60 to 90 minutes. And then at the end of the 90 minutes, everyone's like, oh my gosh, that went so fast. So that's exactly what happened. My gosh, we ended up going for 2 hours. And it's just, it's easy once you get going, once you reconnect. And with someone like Jarome, who's as authentic and as, approachable as he is, and so forthcoming with his opinion, that, geez, you could just keep going. So I really enjoyed that. I really hope you guys got to see a different side of Jarome that maybe you hadn't seen before, and got to hear his opinion and his take on some things that aren't necessarily about the back of the hockey card and, the things that we remember watching on TV, but getting into more of what it's like to be a parent now, and what his experience was like as a black hockey player growing up, and what it's like to, what his grassroots kind of beginning was like, and how his adversity helped crystallize him as a player. And I just really enjoy these, and I really enjoy hearing from someone like Jarome, like that story of him first time on the ice with no socks on and no jersey, and not being able to skate with an afro at the local outdoor rink is just so wild, right? That little 7-year-old kid who was had somebody chirping him for why you play in this sport turns out to be a Hall of Famer. And most people have humble beginnings, and you never know where you're going to end up. So I think that's an amazing takeaway from this. And another amazing takeaway for me is, my goodness, never be too big for anyone else. You know, if there's anyone who's entitled to have a little bit of a pretentiousness to them, it would be somebody like Jarome, 20 seasons in the league, Maurice Richard trophy winner, 6-time All-Star, 2-time gold medalist, 600 goals. You know, I mean, the list goes on and on and on. And this guy is just a jewel of a human. You know, I think he reminds himself daily about what it means to be appreciative and grateful. I know his faith, that we touched on it a little bit, is a big part of that. And, you know, character's king. So pick your role models wisely. I believe Jarome Iginla is one that can be a role model for everybody. And I guess we'll leave you with that. So continue to play hard and keep your head up, everybody. Cheers.